Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jummah Mubarak to you all. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All praise is due to Allah, from whom we seek help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own souls and from those of our bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides will never be led astray. Whomsoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, the one who has no partner. I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad is Allah's true servant and messenger. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. Allah tells us in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. That, O ye who believe, be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah in the way that Allah deserves, and do not die except in a state of full submission to Allah. Allah tells us in the Quran, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O ye who, O humanity, be mindful of your Creator. Be mindful of your Creator who created you from a single soul, and from that soul created its mate. And through both Allah spread countless men and women. And be mindful of Allah, in whose name you appeal to one another, and honor your ties of kinship. Surely Allah is ever watchful over you. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I pray that may Allah open my chest, make easy for me this task, and loosen the knots of my tongue, that these words may be understood. And glory be to you, Allah, glory be to you alone, that we have no knowledge except that which you have given us and that which you have taught us. Verily it is you who is the all-knowing, the all-wise. Again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jummah Mubarak to you all, whether you are in the space here today or attending in some other form in the future. We greet you with blessings and pray that you are in the best of health and spirit on this blessed day. So it's no secret that the example of the Prophet Muhammad SAW for all Muslims is lifted up as the Uswatun Hasana, is lifted up as a perfect pattern, a perfect example and model for all of creation, for all of humanity, not just Muslims, not just those who believe in the Prophet ﷺ, but for anybody, for any person that's on this earth, but especially for those who have believed in the Prophet ﷺ, but for those who follow in his footsteps. It's important for us to be able to see that not only in a sense of his life being a distinctive, him being a distinctive in terms of his walk on this earth, but there's an important aspect to us when we say we want to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ, we want to follow in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We oftentimes will, think about the experiences that we go through in life, the heartbreaks that we experience, the difficulties, the traumas, the injuries, the ups and the downs, and we'll be able to find some resonance when we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But oftentimes we approach it in a way in which we uh, put a little bit of that distance between us and him. And there's different ways to approach this. There's different ways to be able to go about this in a way that can be afforded respect. But we oftentimes spiritually bypass ourselves when we are maybe going through a difficult situation, or maybe going through a difficult trial, or experiencing some kind of trauma, as we do within many other cases, or maybe with other people. It may be done to us by others, where we say to ourselves that, oh, the Prophet ﷺ had went through this, or had gone through this immense difficulty. I should just get my act together. I just need to take it in stride. I just need to get better about it. And to some degree, there's wisdom within being able to recognize what privileges we may have, what advantages and what resources we maybe have, that the Prophet ﷺ and other people going through different extenuating circumstances might not. But there's also an aspect of us being able to think about, what is this aspect of having a nature, or having a kind of a framework of accompaniment with respect to some of the things that the Prophet ﷺ had experienced, that could speak to us in the points in which we go through, the difficult points that we go through, the high points that we go through. It's very easy for us to be able to kind of make it very relative with respect to whose suffering is greater or whose suffering is not. But thinking about everyone's experience in their life for their difficulties or their successes and then the high points and the low points is very subjective to them based on their circumstances, based on their able-bodiedness or their resources or any of the other environmental factors that are around. So it's kind of hard to be able to say that what's difficult for one person or what's easy for one person is not difficult or easy for another person. And thinking about, of course, in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there's immense amount of grief, this immense amount of difficulty, but there is an immense amount of opportunity for those of us going through this life, whether in the positive sides or in the difficult, really struggling parts of life, to be able to find not just solace in being able to kind of spiritually bypass ourselves to say, well, he went through a harder thing, I should just kind of get my act together, to be able to think about what is it like to kind of invite the Prophet ﷺ into that space. What is it like to invite ourselves in a space of accompaniment with some of the difficulties and the tragedies that he experienced and how he had kind of dealt with it, how he had navigated these kinds of difficult situations. And so what I wanted to talk to us about today, what I wanted to share, inshallah, with us today is thinking about the Prophet ﷺ's, specifically his ordeal and his visit to the city of Taif or the town of Taif. Now, as we know that, apart from the Prophet ﷺ's life being this pattern or model being held for excellent behavior and excellent conduct and character for all of humanity, his life was one that was not free of any, was not free from any type of difficulties in a sense. His life was very difficult. His journey was not just him, embraced in comfort and enjoying the privileges of life that are abundance of sorts, but from the earliest age, from his biography, we know of his orphanhood, his early losses that he experienced with respect to his family, the tragedy with respect to not just the loss of his family members, but going on throughout his life when he has children, when he has his own family, and the losses that are experienced there. But not just that, but being displaced from his home, having to migrate, becoming a refugee in his homeland. So there's so many difficult things about his life that by no means made it an easy life or an easy walk. That this was somebody that truly went through the gauntlet with respect to a prophetic responsibility, but was by no means in a journey of comfort. But it's important for us to be able to think about that, especially as we go through the different parts of life that we go through. There are going to be some of those really, valley type of situations that are just at the utmost low points that we experience, the most difficult situations we may experience that also bring us to a point in which we feel most disconnected to our Creator. And it's important for us to find in these moments, rather than to approach the situation and say, oh, the Prophet ﷺ went through something harder, so I just need to get about it. Like I said, you can motivate yourself in different ways, but think about the mindset shift and being like, in what point can I find accompaniment with the Prophet ﷺ in his own journey and in his own life with respect to how he navigated some of these difficulties. And instead of being able to just say like, oh, I can, I just need to, bypass that. I just need to ignore what I'm feeling and just need to, just kind of pick my head up and just kind of keep walking and ignore that or just kind of hold it in. Thinking about, in a sense, what is it like to kind of walk that walk with the Prophet ﷺ? What is it kind of and this aspect of being able to see what is there for us when we treat this in a way that is meant to be treated, is treated in a way that is not just disregarding any one person's experiences, but to be able to say, to reimagine, to be able to honor that difficulty and that experience, but to be able to kind of share in a communal sense a healing that comes about. So the Prophet ﷺ's ordeal at Taif is really interesting because this comes at a time, he goes to the town of Taif at about 620 or so. So, he's already been preaching in Mecca for about, 10 years or so. He's going into, Taif. He's had a bit of a difficult ordeal already within Mecca, not just, within the rejection he's been experiencing from a lot of the people beyond, just his close companions and family who've accepted the faith, but increasingly the city has and the town and the people have not just rejected the Prophet ﷺ, but they've boycotted his tribe. They've socially boycotted, economically boycotted his people. They've gone through so many different types of layers of persecution in which his community is truly on the margins, that he is not by any means any closer to having, like, the outcome that he would expect or desire than he is, in a sense, at this point. His also at this stage, his trusted companion, his life companion, Khadija, his soulmate, has passed away. His guardian, his protector, Abu Talib, his rock, has also passed away. And so he's really weakened in this position. You just think about so many different structural supports that have just been taken out. You think about just environmentally, this is a unsustainable, unlivable space. And so he tries to go to Taif, this mountain town, to try and near Mecca, to try and find some support to try and establish himself in that space. And it was about maybe 2-3 day journey from Mecca. Again, like I said, is more fertile, is a little bit of a nicer space to be able to kind of go. And so the Prophet ﷺ goes into this town, and there's narrations, and there's kind of more within his biographies about what he experienced there. But essentially, he was met with rejection there as well. He was not met with the treatment that he had expected. He had tried to invite some of the leaders to convert, to accept him, and to come to Islam. But that it didn't necessarily have any tangible results in that aspect. And instead, what happened, rather than being able to take the Prophet ﷺ up on his invitation and to be able to treat him in the hospitable way, you instead see these leaders kind of rally the people of Taif, especially the youth of Taif, to basically get him out, to toss him out of the city in a very humiliating way, where the youth and these townspeople essentially just force the Prophet ﷺ out by pelting him with stones, by just stoning him out, and just chasing him out of the town. Just think about the scene. Just think about not just the imagery that's there, but think about just the internal messaging that you might experience, in this sense, where life just has utterly been giving you so many different difficulties, has been throwing so many different curveballs at you already. Your structural support is being pulled out. Your closest supporters, your loved ones, have passed. The environment around you has become inhospitable, and you try to go to one place that you think you can find some respite in. And maybe you've heard some rumors about it. Maybe some people there. Maybe and think about this society in this time, that this is even though it's a quite tribal society, that people know one another. People are aware of one another. They're not just trying to, hop on a train or a plane and just fly somewhere and be like, oh, this sounds like a cool place to go. That there's reasons that the Prophet ﷺ went to Taif. There's obviously some wisdom with respect to what may have taken him there. But thinking about that, this may be the next place you feel like you can trust, and that place, just the carpet and the rug is pulled right from under you. And so the Prophet ﷺ comes to this space, and utterly humiliated, and not just traumatized in a psychological sense, but physically attacked, physically wounded, to the point to where when he leaves the city, there's the reports talk about how his shoes were soaked with blood, that his shoes were his feet essentially were bloodied, that he himself was physically just taxed in this way. It was just utterly abused, verbally, physically, psychologically. And what happens in this space, I think, is a very telling moment, in the sense of what may happen for us when we go through difficulties in life, regardless of what the level of those difficulties may be, but how we perceive it, how we process it. There may be a wisdom in here for us across the board. And you think about, at this moment, again, the Prophet ﷺ has experienced this tremendous ordeal, not just that compounds on top of what is at home, back in Mecca, what is waiting for him back in Mecca, when he's already experienced so much loss, when he's already living in a space that has heavily persecuted him. he comes into this space, he's leaving Taif, and he escapes there, basically for his life, and finds refuge in an orchard just outside of the town of Taif. And you think about in the sense that where does Allah meet us? How does Allah come to us in the space? That we oftentimes think about that in moments like these, we feel like Allah has maybe abandoned us, that maybe Allah has become disconnected, or we become disconnected from Allah. And we think that, Allah is not aware of our circumstances, or that we are, just kind of disregarded, or we are, just absolutely not in any way, in any type of connection with Allah at this point. And thinking about at this moment that, the Prophet ﷺ, going through all the things that he goes through, he sits in this orchard, he sits in this place, and there's a dua that is related about the Prophet ﷺ in this moment, where he says that, oh Allah, I complain to you of my weakness. I complain to you of my scarcity of resources and the humiliation before the people. Oh, most merciful, you are the Lord of the weak, and you're my Lord too. To whom have you entrusted me? To one who does not care for me, or have you appointed for me my enemy as the master of my affairs? So as long as you're not angry with me, I don't care. Your favor is abundant for me. All I do is I seek refuge in the light of your face, by which all darkness is dispelled and every affair of this world and the next is set right. Unless your anger or your displeasure descend upon me, I desire your pleasure and satisfaction until you're pleased, and there's no power to do good and no might to refrain from evil except with you. That the Prophet says, in this moment of utter, just lowness, in a sense, just feeling like at the point that at his breaking point, that at the end of at his wits end, at the end of his rope, whatever kind of analogy or euphemism you want to use in this sense, that the Prophet is exhausted in this sense, and thinking about this is now about 10 years or so into his ministry. This is not just the next day or 2 days after he received revelation. This is after a decade of having to endure what he's had to endure. And finally, at this moment, he lifts up to Allah that, I complain to you, Allah, of my weakness. I bring you my complaint of just the state of my affairs, that I don't have resources. My pillars have been taken back. I've returned to you. The people have humiliated me. I'm drenched in my own blood and in my own wounds. I'm utterly weak in the context of my support and whatever I don't have. Who are you leaving me to? But as long as you are not angry with me or displeased with me or have forsaken me, I am I seek nothing else other than your pleasure and desire that which you please. And so thinking about at this moment that the Prophet ﷺ has a very sincere and honest dua, but he does it with a complaint that is lodged and given to the divine, given to Allah in a proper and befitting way, in a way that is not just like, hey, I'm going to just shake my fist in anger and just complain and just kind of center myself in this point. But you see kind of how the Prophet models a very proper, a very, still care-centered way in terms of acknowledging his circumstances, acknowledging his weakness and his difficulty, and not bypassing himself, that, oh, you've taught me that other prophets have gone through worse or gone through difficulties, so I'll just kind of suck it up and just move on to the next one. That he was exhausted, and he's at this point. And we see in different narrations, but in one that mentions that as the Prophet ﷺ has settled at this orchard, what comes to the Prophet ﷺ in this moment when he offers this supplication, and you think about who the Prophet ﷺ is, especially to Allah, who is the Prophet ﷺ in his rank compared to the rest of humanity, that the Prophet ﷺ's dua, his supplication, is one that warrants that type of response, is one that is one that Allah would respond to more than anyone else in this context. And you think about that at this point, the Prophet ﷺ's the story in a sense goes that how the Prophet ﷺ is at this orchard, and a Christian slave comes to the Prophet ﷺ, who is a Christian slave of the owners of that orchard, who see the Prophet ﷺ just this person who's just kind of set by their tree, they themselves are not Muslim. They themselves are, from a Meccan tribe, but they take pity on him. They're like, man, that's just a sad situation. Just, they send their slave whose name's Adas, and they send him to give him a plate of grapes or some dates, and just some food, water, some little things that are there. And you think about, at that moment, the Prophet that he's maybe recited in the space that, have you abandoned me? Have you left me? Like, show me that you're not displeased with me. Tell me that you're not angry with me. And Allah didn't open up the heavens and say, I'm not angry with you. I'm not displeased with you, as easy as it is for Allah to do these miraculous things. But the way in which Allah gave the Prophet a comfort, gave the Prophet a respite, thinking about, in this sense, it was in the form of a plate of grapes or dates or some water brought by somebody who was a stranger. And in that stranger, the Prophet and had a chance to talk to that person, to that boy Adas, who had heard the Prophet as he was eating these dates and drinking this water, saying before he did Bismillah. And they had this whole dialogue where the Prophet learns of this boy who's from Nineveh, which is the same town from where Yunus alayhi or Jonah is from. And so they have this interesting kind of dialogue. And Adas at that point, this moment, as the story goes, recognizes that this can't be a liar. This can't, the things that he's telling me, he can't be lying, and accepts him as a prophet. But thinking about this was only about halfway through the Prophet's prophetic ministry. He still had about 13 years, 12 years to go. And so this was just the halfway point. And we know what happens after this. The Prophet goes back to Mecca. His situation is not much better, ultimately having to migrate to Medina, and not just going into Medina where they finally have their own city and town, but we know what happens there. We know of the battles that the community has to face. We know of the losses that the Prophet has to face with respect to not just his own family, but with respect to some of his closest companions, his uncle, and so on and so forth. And so you think about, at this point in life, that what came to the Prophet, what he described to Aisha later on as his most difficult day. The most difficult day in his life, he noted, was at Taif. But how the Prophet handled it, how the Prophet went through it, and also how Allah brought about the answer to his prayers was not in one that was just a black and white answer, but thinking about in some of these very subtle and very gentle ways, but thinking about that. What did this moment that for the Prophet being described as his most difficult, his most low moment, what was his mindset to be able to kind of keep picking up and to keep going, with respect to carrying out the rest of his ministry? This is a point where anybody would be exhausted, or not even, maybe just like, I kind of give up. This is it. Like, this is the edge of it. My support is gone. I've got nothing else going for me. I'm just kind of done with this. And thinking about, at this point here, what respite was offered by Allah was not the ultimate cushion that was given, or let me just exalt you and let me just continue to clear you of all these different difficulties here. But think about, what can I give you at the immediate need to address your immediate need, your biological need in this sense. You think about these hierarchy of needs, but what do you need just right now? You'd probably just enjoy some dates and some water, you're probably just parched, you're probably just really exhausted physically. But now that you've kind of refilled it, you've built a connection with the community, you've connected with somebody who's a stranger who you didn't know to connect with before, and now you have some motivation to be able to get up and to be able to continue that fight. But think about, what was that moment of rest for the Prophet like, just under that orchard tree? What was that moment like to have somebody who was a stranger, who the Prophet did not know, come to him and to not just help him and to take something from him, but to be able to interact and to dialogue with that person, to not just sit in a space and think that one's abandoned by Allah, but to use that moment to connect with Allah and to pray to Allah in an honest way, and not in a way that just completely disregards one's circumstances or says that I'm just bypassing myself and holding in all the difficulties I've experienced, but in a way that is very honest and authentic to your experience, that it builds a more meaningful connection. Because the seeds that were planted with respect to the connection to Allah, that reinforced within this time, this most difficult, most low moment, continued to blossom and continued to reinforce as the Prophet ﷺ's life went on, that it didn't get much easier for the Prophet ﷺ in different ways, that different things started to happen that started to help the Prophet and help the mission of Islam. But by no means was it an easy journey going forward. They still had to leave their home. They still had to be displaced from their home to migrate. People still had to, endure tremendous persecution, family separation, all these different types of ordeals, loss of life, and all these different things that were experienced. But thinking about that at this lowest moment, the Prophet found maybe his strongest connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he found this connection and built this connection here, that it gives us a model of how we can also be able to build that connection in those most difficult moments where we just feel exhausted, we feel drained, we feel completely disconnected. It may not be in these moments where we say instead Allah has abandoned us, that Allah has left us, that we have left Allah, that we have feel disconnected or forsaken, but instead bring that disconcerted feeling, bring those honest sentiments to Allah, because who else are we going to bring them to? And thinking about also being open-minded to seeing how Allah answers our prayers and our efforts and makes that path clear. It might not be something that just opens the heavens and descends right in front of us. It may be through the subtlest things that if we don't pay heed to or be mindful of, we might have missed that sign. We might have missed the answer to that prayer. If somebody comes and says, hey, can you help me with something? Or can I do anything for you? Or whatever it might be, it may be very subtle, but we also know that Allah is Latif. Allah is the one who is subtle and works in subtle ways. And so if this ordeal at Taif, that is the most difficult day in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, teaches us anything, is to be able to recognize the subtleties that are there, but also to be able to think about how in these moments we can accompany our Prophet ﷺ, how in this moment our Prophet ﷺ can accompany us through the difficulties that we endure, through the challenges that we endure in life. We don't need to be able to just hold in and bypass ourselves, but to be able to think about instead, what would the Prophet ﷺ have done? Look, he did all this stuff. I shouldn't have to complain. Instead, how would the Prophet ﷺ have navigated this situation? How would he have gone through this ordeal? So may Allah allow us to be a people that walks alongside the Prophet ﷺ, that walks in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ, and don't just feel like our footsteps are not even worthy of being acknowledged, or our footsteps are not even worthy of being even discussed, just because the Prophet ﷺ's example has shown us how to live a life in the best of ways and in the most dignified of ways and in the most arduous of circumstances, but also in the best of circumstances, that just because of that, the life we live merits no discussion or conversation or point to sit on. But instead, may we find the Prophet ﷺ within our own lives and conversation there. And when we connect deeper to the Prophet ﷺ and the way he experienced his life in the fullest, in the deepest of traumas, but also in the most lightest of ways, how we can think about how we can provide a way for ourselves to increase our connection to Allah. So may Allah allow us to be a people who not only connect with our Prophet ﷺ, but through the connection with our Prophet ﷺ, be able to connect with Allah, and through the connection with the Prophet ﷺ, through the connection with Allah, be able to connect with all those who are around us, whether they are our family, our community members, but also people who are strangers, people who we may not have counted on or thought about in the past, but may actually be the outlets to building and increasing this connection to Allah and the answers to our prayers that we may not have ever thought of. So may Allah allow us to be a people that as had reflected to Allah, as had prayed to Allah, that you have not created all of this. You have not created all of these different things in the world except, in vain. You have not created this without purpose or aimlessly. So we ask Allah to remind us of this, that even that includes ourselves, that we have not been created aimlessly. We have not been created without purpose. And so may Allah remind us of this, and may we remind ourselves that we are a people of purpose, with purpose, regardless of those circumstances. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. We pray to Allah, accept this from us, for thou art indeed all hearing and all knowing. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.